I'm John Atack, and this is my great good friend, Ronnie Woods. And we're going to ramble on, as Led Zeppelin.
We are, as we do.
As we do.
I'm not sure, and you could correct me because maybe you know. I think there's a journalist in Australia.
Yeah, you're right. There is a journalist in Australia.
I mean, one that is courageous enough to do some very fine work on the subject of the bogus and counterfeit religion called Scientology. I love to use that phrase because they can't stop that phrase, and that's so irritating.
You can say what you like.
I can actually say a lot of things.
And it's not only bogus, it is counterfeit. It's so true. What do you think of the religion angle? L. Ron Hubbard, 10th of April, 1953 to Helen O'Brien. The religion angle.
Exactly.
Best way to make $1 million is to start a religion. L. Ron Hubbard to 4 people that I was able to find.
Well, my brilliant young barrister said at one point when she was actually exultant because they wanted to settle, and I said no, and she got to skip down the hall to talk to the QC when she was just a junior barrister to say, no, she doesn't want to. But her most excited moment, I think, was when she said that they signed an undertaking that I could pretty much say anything I'd put into discovery. And she said she tried to use all kinds of words that she thought they would never agree to, like all of the things that I had submitted, or she can say anything regarding the documents. She can say anything and express her opinion about. She wrote an undertaking that she said no one in their right mind would ever sign.
And no one in their right mind did ever sign it.
Yeah, she was astonished that they would sign. But anyway, there's this journalist in Australia who I don't want to misquote this, and maybe Spike is very good at finding the true statements about what I ramble on about. And I think it's Brian Seymour. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But anyway, there's this supposed, alleged, it has to be alleged now because they won't put it on TV. But there was an alleged documentary that was going to be called Scientology, the Black Ops.
Yeah, and there have been plenty of them.
Yeah, for sure.
We're waiting for the definitive account of the Black Ops, which will be coming from Chris Owen. And that is going to be an incredible book. He's traveled all over the world and looked into the government inquiries and trawled through probably by now millions of documents, found all sorts of things that we didn't know about because they were good at covering up. And so that is going to be an explosive book when it
Absolutely. Comes out. My husband always said we're not even close to where the bodies are buried.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesse Prince said to me that he would never trust Mike Rinder or Marty Rathbun until they said where they buried the bodies. Now, I quite like Mike, but I don't think anybody likes Marty very much. But there you go.
Well, I there's a part of me that feels compassion for that tortured soul. But anyway, they were going to have this supposed documentary.
Alleged documentary.
And so then it was meant to be sort of like July 9th, but then it was postponed, which always means somebody's hammering them. Yep. But what I've read lately is that they didn't just postpone it, it's not going to be shown. And apparently having something to do with the influence of James Packer.
Who is Kerry Packer's son, I'm guessing?
Yeah, and who was a member for some time and is allegedly no longer, but apparently had some influence.
Was allegedly a member and is allegedly no longer a member, allegedly.
Exactly. You know how that goes. Because who knows?
Really? I know allegedly how it goes, yeah.
But actually, they're not going to show it. And there was an article indicating that was because of his request. Now, whether he owns the place or not, I don't know. But I don't think, I'm not Australia. I don't think he owns quite Australia yet. But anyway, Leah Remini had reacted to that I think through Tony Ortega's blog, saying that she had written a chapter about Cruz for her book, but had been persuaded by her publisher to not do it because it would, the media would get focused on that, of course, and not on.
There's the little bit about him having a screaming fit over not having his cookie dough ready to cut,
or something like that.
And there's a little bit about his wedding as well, which is it's a very good book. It's a very good book.
Yeah, I didn't mind the book,
yeah.
But apparently there was a chapter left out which she gave to Tony Ortega, who has, I think, published either part of it or excerpts from it.
He's such a naughty person, that Tony Ortega.
I couldn't
Allegedly.
get through it. I couldn't get through it because it bores me. But
yeah, does get a bit
anyway,
after a while.
It was the language that what I meant to be talking about was her language towards not only Tom Cruise but the whole idea in general. It's such a I'm thinking that it's such a hateful language. How in the world are we ever going to help them if we intend to react to them or even to refer to them or to talk about it in such a vitriolic way?
Yeah, I mean, Leah Remini in Troublemaker, the book says you can take the girl out of Scientology, but you can't take Scientology out of the girl. I have said elsewhere, I wrote to her as soon as I read that, sent her a copy of Blue Sky at my own personal expense, and had a charming, handwritten letter back. But what I was suggesting was that you and I know how to take Scientology out of the girl, and I have been known to do it in a day. And it pains me, having met people who for decades have had Scientology still inside them. And one aspect of that is the anger.
Such anger.
Yeah. And, I did it ended up being hours with Chris Shelton going through the Judith Herman's complex post-traumatic disorder symptoms one by one with him, which I'd never done with anybody in public or in private before. And I was, he grew up in it. He was in the SEAL for, about 1 billion years. And it really resonated that there was so much of this that he managed to climb out of and get through. But that anger, that black and white thinking, that polarity, that, I always tell the story about Carlos Cornea, and I've actually named him this time, the brilliant filmmaker and percussionist and various other things, and a lovely, lovely man. Last time I saw him in Paris. I hadn't seen him for 20-something years. And he curiously sent me a Facebook message saying he was going to be in Paris. And I hadn't heard from him for years, and I don't look at Facebook, but that day I did. And I said, well, I'm there tomorrow. So,
nice.
So we met up and he said, how old are you? And I told him, and he said, damn, you're still younger than me.
You're younger than me too.
Yeah, so there is some hope for me. But he, when he was in the Sea organization, swimming around there, was put on the rehabilitation project force, and at their lovely facilities in Clearwater, Florida, and in the black boiler suit, and there was a protest going on. This was a long time ago. This was about 1981 or something. And one of the protesters spat at him, and that to me has always summed up the problem: that who is to blame and how shall we hurt them? That we move into civilization as human beings when we get past blood feud, vendetta. And it's happened, when the Cherokee decided that they couldn't beat the white folks, they, as their northern neighbors had done, they buried the hatchet, which comes from the northern Iroquois. They're the southern Iroquois. And they said, okay, we'll become farmers. We'll stop being warriors and we'll sort everything out. But you have to end the blood feud. You have to say, how can we help each other? Rather than your great-grandfather did this to my great-grandfather, or, Scientology hurt me, therefore, or China is bad, or not understanding the human element that it's not that America is full of hateful, awful people who should be genocidally murdered. It's just Donald Trump. and a few others,
Yeah.
who also shouldn't be hatefully genocidally murdered. They should be just removed from a position of power,
Yeah.
and probably take a bit less Adderall in Donald Trump's case, allegedly. But I couldn't agree more. It's that vitriol, which is the unhealed soul. It's somebody
Yeah.
who is deeply unhappy, and they think that they can get happy by hanging some
Yeah.
victim, even if it's not
Yeah.
the person who is in any way responsible for what's happening to them. So Leah,
Well,
stop it.
I wonder if they actually...
Well, just come and see me, come and see me. I'll give you a free day, if you want. It's not about making money. It's about trying to help people,
I wonder, well, it's sad in a way, because to be in that position that she is in, where she could actually have some impact.
Yes, we keep saying it, don't we? Yeah, Aftermath could have been about recovery.
Yeah, it should be about that. But more importantly, it should be, can we not remember that we were subject to the same victimization, that we had the same feelings that they're having, that we were defensive as they're defensive, that we will interpret anything like that, any kind of language like that will be quickly interpreted as suppressive and proof of what was said to them in the mindset. So you couldn't pick a more ineffective way to reach the people you're trying to reach.
Yep.
What we're trying to say to them is, it's okay that you believe that, but come and talk about what else is possible, or let's talk about the truth of what you've been told. But can we not approach that without being, because there will never be any opportunity to reach the people that we need to reach. The public don't need to be reached. The internet has thoroughly educated everyone that it is absolutely bogus, absolutely counterfeit.
I think you find it was
ridiculous.
I think you'll find it was me and Chris Owen that educated the public by putting things on the internet.
Yeah.
And that the real education was South Park.
Yes.
That was the thing that I think burst the bubble. That after, Anonymous was, it was good that they felt that way, but they just made it harder for people to leave.
Well, also, it's interesting to me because the circles that I travel in are obviously the Christian community, and they have very little knowledge of Scientology, and they're somewhat interested in Aftermath. They find it interesting to watch, but they actually say, well, Bonnie, how are those people getting helped?
Yeah.
And who's going to help them? And how do you do that? How do you speak to them? How could they be reached? Because obviously a Christian community is always interested in who can be reached.
Well, if it's truly Christian, yes. Many of them certainly aren't, but
yeah. But I mean, most of the people that I run with or hang with are people who are trying to be encouraging or helpful to other people. That's the whole point. Not to what they believe, but to what we have to walk in. But I'm constantly, it makes me cringe the way things are worded.
Yes, the lack of empathy, the lack of compassion, which is very much something that's implanted during Scientology. And no sympathy, this awful attitude of mind towards other people, which is very much the attitude of mind of any malignant narcissist, any psychopath, sociopath, that you should achieve this state. And we see that Hubbard was, of course, seeking to cure his narcissism, which he completely failed in doing, and B, passing on, cloning that narcissism in those around. I mean, I hesitate a little bit. There's something you said about, us all having these reactions, and allegedly, and I have to say that I didn't, that I walked out of Scientology without any anger, without any sense of, harming anybody. I absolutely had a really easy time of it, and maybe I had a bit of survivor guilt, but it meant that I didn't understand why people weren't willing to stand up. And I found out very quickly. You know?
Yeah.
And in terms of, I hope that all of your friends in the Christian community have this book, because this is the basic guide to what Scientology is. And it was written for people who've never had any involvement. And I get the royalties. So, and it was published.
So what is, I don't know that book.
It's, yeah, well, you don't know it, but curiously, the publisher is Richard Woods. Yeah. So your husband is the publisher and you don't know it. Isn't that terrible? Because
well,
that means that any allegations I make are covered by my publisher.
Okay. Okay.
But it replaced that. There was a Total Freedom Trap out there, and I just decided that rather than rewriting the Total Freedom Trap, I'd do this. And this was actually, I went to St. Petersburg, which was fabulous, in 2014, under the invitation of my great friend, Professor Alexander Dvorkin, who is the target of many slander campaigns all over the world, all originating with Scientology, I think. And he is a wonderful man, and I've known him for 27 years or something. So, you know, I can speak. He's stayed in my house. I can speak with some authority about his decency. But he invited me over there, and it was a conference of about 200 mainly Orthodox priests. Though there were representatives of other communities there, and there was they made a mistake. That I said, well, how long do I have to speak? And originally I was told 40 minutes, but then I was told, no, you have 2 hours. When I got there, having written a 2-hour presentation, half an hour before I was due to go on, Alexander said, you've got 40 minutes. I said, but what do I do? Luckily, the mayor of the St. Petersburg Duma backed out of the next day's meeting. So I got to give my whole talk in 2 parts.
That's good.
No less than the Archbishop of Crete was there.
Ooh.
He was one of the most wonderful human beings I've ever met.
I bet. Yeah.
Really kind and lovely man. But we got it. So we thought, well, we'll publish it, because it was an explanation beginning to end of, the various, you've got the headings in it, the UFO cult, hard sell, the source, the Crowley connection, Dianetic Scientology, the organization, the Guardian's office, religion, claims, Christianity, hypnosis. Christianity, of course, explains Hubbard's contempt for Christianity, that it's an implant invented at various different times, according to him, 600 BC, 75 million years ago. Hypnosis, litigation, rehabilitation project force, Miscavige. The Scientologist writes The Price of Freedom, Celebrities and Psychiatry, The Rise of the Critics, The Free Zone, Resources. And, it covers the ground because they're largely quotations from L. Ron Hubbard. It includes, for example, a printout of this letter, 1938 letter, part of it written to his first wife, which you can get from the Library of Congress. It's been copyrighted by Scientology. Where he says that personal immortality is only to be gained through the printed word, barred note, or painted canvas, or hard graphite. I think he meant granite, but who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe graphite's a substance in, foolishly perhaps, but determined nonetheless. I have high hopes of smashing my name into history so violently that it will take a legendary form, even if all the books are destroyed. And he's already written Excalibur, his famous first brilliant insight. And here he's saying he doesn't believe in immortality, the founder of the religion of Scientology, unless you've got some hard graphite, allegedly.
Maybe that's what T-Jack is made out of, graphite.
Yes, it could be the Jerry Armstrong Corporation or TIGIAC.
Exactly.
But so, yeah, definitely it's slim, it's cheap.
It's cheap.
It's like me, really. And do you remember in East Grinstead when all the churches were handing out copies of the Total Freedom Trap at the end of all of them did it. It was great. I didn't make any money.
They were very fond of that. When we were working with churches together, they loved the leaflet too, though, to be fair. They did love the leaflet. They liked
75 million years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that that was probably Paul Astorley, Stephen Bowen, those vicars.
And
They were
Roger.
Yeah, and Roger. They were determined to protect. And
Roger had 20 years of speaking out against them. Nothing stopped him.
Yeah.
What's his surname? His surname's eluded me.
Brown. Was it Brown?
Could be. But he was the canon. He was the top, the guy, top gun for the Anglican diocese. And
that they were a good group because they were determined. Now, East Grinstead's just run over by everything.
I went back 5-6 years ago, not having been there for years, and it was like there was tumbleweed blowing through the town.
Oh, it's unbelievable! It's such a sad sort of thing.
Yeah.
We still have a dear, very, very dear friend and mentor, who lives in Felbridge, so we go through there periodically. But I think from a spiritual standpoint, there's no opposition at all, which is sad, really. And they will wait. They will bide their time to take advantage of that.
But the census in 2011 showed that there were only 2,000 people claiming to be Scientologists in the UK, and we know that a lot of them would be family members who didn't dare say otherwise. And obviously the dogs, cats, and body thetans. The Jedi faith has declined since the earlier census, but there were still something like 170,000 Jedi in the UK, with 2,000, the fastest sinking religion. I've actually, my fourth quotation in the National Enquirer will come out tomorrow. I'm so chuffed. I've been the National Enquirer 4 times. And
talk about getting your name in the pages of history.
Yes. They quoted me about body satans the last time, which I was so pleased about, because it's just that L. Ron Hubbard had a lisp, and they're body satans. But it really struck me. This is one of his little jokes. His crass little jokes. But this time, Douglas Montero, who's writing the piece, he just wrote to me and he said, "I think the ship's sinking. Will you give us a quote?" And it's like, God, I don't even have to do any research or anything. So I talked about, this organization having run adrift some years ago, and now the Hulk is emptying out. Which I hope they'll use. But I don't think, what I've heard for the last 15 years is that there's barely anybody involved with Scientology anymore. So in this,
I don't know what there must be. Subsisting off the whales, mostly. Those who give,
which they've done for years. Willie B. Wilson, the billionaire, was pouring money into them.
And it's interesting to me, though, that the media on the very sad happening of Kelly Preston dying, very sad, and one can easily presume that a complete lack of medical treatment up to 2016 was
very high rate of cancer deaths in Scientology over the years. And I think when we were leaving and still believed in such things, we thought it was some kind of rotten kind of auditing procedure that was being used. And then I read Brown McGee's testimony from the Clearwater hearings in May '82. And he'd been a 24-year member, I think. And he said that when his wife got cancer, they were just shuffled off to the Hoxie Clinic or somewhere in Mexico. When they went into the waiting room, it was full of people they knew. And they'd all left it too late. The Steve Jobs approach, and the way they went, which is very sad.
But what's interesting to me that in the media response, there wasn't a single mention of her being a Scientologist. Not one.
No.
Which I thought very odd, really.
I'm sure she'd been a Roman Catholic. We'd have heard about it.
Well, I don't know. It just seemed odd to me. And of course, there was no mention in the tragedy of Lisa's son committing suicide. There was no mention either of his membership in
They
Scientology.
do seem to be mentioning Danny Masterson's membership.
Oh, well, yeah, that I guess they can't get away from. But I had actually thought that the media had been becoming more, at least willing to tell the truth, and at least less, I thought for a while it was less daunted by their opposition to anything being published.
I think something very simple happened. In 2011, they lost the case against Time magazine. It said that Time had spent, which was 20 years, it was a 1991 article, which was also called Scientology, the Cult of Greed. That's why I used the title as a kind of homage to Rich Behar for his brave work. This is irrelevant and egotistical, but Reader's Digest published a version of that article, and they weren't sued.
I remember that, yeah.
They weren't sued. Their Time had a circulation of about 5 million. Reader's Digest had a circulation of about 120 million. And they published the same article but weren't sued. And there was one difference between the two articles. They fact-checked it with me. I told them, and the suit hadn't started. They hadn't sued Behar yet. But I told them where the contentious points would be. And indeed, that's what they were sued for. They still won it, quite rightly. But I believe that at that point, Miscavige made the mistake, and I hope he's listening. He made the mistake of stopping threatening people. Now, we have to put this group into perspective. There's no allegedly about this. I'm willing to go into court about this as a fact. This is the most litigious group that has ever existed in the history of mankind. They dropped 3,000 cases in a single day in 1993 when they crushed the IRS. I mean, who's ever beaten the IRS before? Who's ever made them go and cringe in the corner before? These are the people that took Al Capone down, you know?
Yeah.
So they have brought more cases. And I think Miscavige realized that the war chest was no longer flowing into his living trust in the Netherlands Antilles, if anybody would like to go and check how much money he's got. He wasn't, it was all going to lawyers, because I believe by that time they had 15 law firms under permanent hire, running under Kendrick Toxic Moxon, as I like to think of him, allegedly. And so you've got, they changed policy. The law can be used very easily to harass. That's scripture, Scientology. And Miscavige, as he had with other Hubbard scriptures, just decided not to do it. And along came Janet Reitman and Rolling Stone into the little gap. And it, for the first, Blue Sky was published, Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky. My magnum opus was published in 1990. And her Inside Scientology, a title borrowed from Robert Kaufman, came out 21 years later, and there was nothing in the English language between, no book between. Now, there'd been books from 1951 onwards up to mine. And then the time all of the publishers got scared, all of the media got scared. I think that there may be some lawyers' letters going around again.
It would seem they've revved up the machine again. Yeah.
So it's not just the private investigators who you can disclaim and say, oh, we didn't know they were doing that. We thought that Eugene Ingram was a really nice bloke. Thrown out of the LAPD by, I think it was Daryl Gates who threw him out for his dealings with prostitutes and drug dealers and the like. I mean, he's basically the model for the Shield, that guy, and he then becomes their top. I think he's dead now, isn't he, Eugene? I hope he is. I don't. That's unfair. I hope he's been redeemed and is singing in a choir of angels somewhere.
Yeah.
Allegedly.
Well, I think that there's got to be some responsibility taken by the people who are claiming to be people that have left and who had historically a lot of information. I think a lot of that information is missing.
In all the years that I was researching, I only had an interview with one person who'd been involved in Branch 1. I met several, would not talk. Along the way, casually was was told by a woman that she had had sex with 2 British members of Parliament on behalf of Scientology. I had a friend who for 6 years had worked as a free assistant to Clement Freud MP, working on freedom of information. I met people along the way. I found out that the names of the 2 agents who'd penetrated the Home Office in this country. And the Home Office didn't even reply to my letter when I advised them of this. That's how interested they were. But there was only one person, and that was Brian Rubinek. And we did a series of interviews over 3 nights, 11 hours of interviews in Woodside, California, near Palo Alto. And in a deathbed declaration during a case which I, quite by accident, was hired to be on, so I would never have seen this otherwise. In a deposition, he explained that he'd been working for Scientology when he'd been interviewed by me. So yes, there is a tremendous responsibility on anybody who committed crimes on behalf of Scientology to come forward and set the record straight, because the harm they did has bred. It has got worse and worse. And the more that people tell the truth. I came away from Scientology. I hadn't hurt a fly. I hadn't hurt anybody. I hadn't harassed anybody. I refused to disconnect. For 6 months before I left, I was fighting against a friend having been declared suppressive, who we're not going to name here. But I would not do any of that stuff. And I did not do any of that stuff. But if somebody did, they need to make it known. Some of those operations were so savage, so awful. I mean, there was one guy from B1 who testified. His name was Ernie something at Clearwater, and that was very brave indeed. But it's realizing that they're not going to get rid of the burden upon them until they confess, until they do their integrity processing, and that means telling the world. Telling the world.
Well, not only that, but I think that will speak more to the people involved than any other kind of raging about how you were treated. The actual factual evidence of what has happened to people speaks so much to people who are still inside. Because I remember I had one young man who, when I was in the court case, who told his father, if I find out, because I'd spent hours and hours telling him just what things that had happened. He said, if I find out that she's told the truth and they have done this to her, I will leave that day. And he did, because he couldn't argue with the fact that these things were done. And that is the only thing that I think will trigger someone who's currently involved, is something that is so abhorrent to them, to their conscience, which is still there, that they will actually begin to think. And all this ranting about, well, I think they're horrible and he's horrible, and I don't really care. Mr. Cruz has his own, he's going to have to live, he's going to have to be accountable for whatever he's done. But just his celebrity is not going to help that much. Annihilating his celebrity standing or whatever, who cares? What we care about is what happened to real people and how were they hurt, because that's what will make people stop and think. That's what I think.
I agree with you that there is an accountability here. And, particularly with Mark Rathbun, that he was the henchman. And he wrote those perverse texts, which were basically, that he was now the new Messiah, and was going to, it was following the footsteps of David Mayo. David Mayo at least had done the Class 12 course and everything else. Rathbun was just a self-appointed narcissist. But he was privy to all sorts of stuff. One of the given that Scientology is so much about memory, so much about recollecting past events through Dianetics or whatever, it's surprising how poor the memories are of the people who did the harassment.
Absolutely.
I don't want to get into it with Mike Rinder, because I say he seems to me a decent man. He really does.
Yeah.
But whenever I ask him a question, and every few months I'll write him another email and say, what do you know about Laura Terrapin? And he'll say, never.
Yeah.
So she was the woman that infiltrated CAN, Cult Awareness Network, and wrecked it from the inside. And I believe she was a hired private detective, and that was not her real name. I mean, who is called Terrapin in this world? It's like, that's just a silly name. Apparently there was a stolen identity, but she caused havoc. Probably the most destructive thing that Scientology did was to take the Cult Awareness Network down, because it was the only effective opposition.
Exactly. Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I did rail with them through the late 80s to say, you've really got to stop advocating kidnap deprogramming. But it was because of a case involving Rick Ross, who was sued, and that then went on, and they were able to buy the Cult Awareness Network, and a judge awarded them all of its confidential files. Which I believe may have been a little threadbare by the time they got to Scientology. But the idea that you've got a group saying, we're not a cult, and then they're going, hello, Cult Awareness Network, how can I help you?
Horrible, really.
Deception, the hypocrisy. But but I'd say there's another thing as well. The one thing is to bring home to people the horrors of this group, the awful things that it's done, the rehabilitation project for us. And Leah Remini and Mike Rinder have done a really good job of showing those horrors. But you also have to take responsibility for what you did. So I found that I dealt, I talked with about 600 ex-members and hopefully helped them in sorting whatever problems they had from Scientology out. But I found that there were three distinct groups. There were the people who were victims, and they said, this is what was done to me. And in some cases, it was purely true. They hadn't done anything. The overt motivated sequence, karma, vipaka, does not. They were victimized. They were raped. They were exploited. So there is a group of people like that, but there are a lot of people who put themselves into that group. At the other end, you've got the people who realize that they did horrific things to other people. I have a very close friend who was a very high-ranking Hubbard aide, and he can't talk about it even 30-something years later, because he starts to weep about the things that he was pushed into doing, particularly during the last months of his involvement. But I've got every sympathy in the world for those people. When Vicky Asnaran came to me, having been Inspector General of the Inquisition or whatever, the Religious Technology Inquisition, she came to me asking for my help back in the early 90s, because she was suing them. And I said, well, that will cost you this much. And she said, you'll charge me money? And it's like, yeah, in your case, I will, because I haven't seen a single statement where you accept responsibility, and I have counseled people that you harmed. So that's then in the middle you've got the group that say, this was done to me and I did this. And that group are a lot closer to being healed and recovering than the victims, who have to either in real life get over what actually happened to them, or in real life accept that they too were victimizing people. They were part of a chain. So okay, I was in the SS, but they made me do it. Well, didn't work.
And I think it should be avoided to use the victims of the aftermath as the legal clout until you help them.
Until
because they're going. Those people, and what there've been 2 women, or at least 1 woman now, and it's not right. If you're not going to,
nobody tells you that it's going to be cage fighting. Nobody tells you they're going to chuck you in the cage and you're going to have to do this. You and I have done it. We've been on the witness stand. We've done this stuff. You don't do this stuff, until you're strong. And
even us, and we, and I had you, and I had people behind me, but when my QC told me, Bonnie, I think I'm estimating that you'll be on the stand 19 days. Even, I was in a Christian retreat you know, to get even close to being able to think about that. And then they decided to settle 24 hours before.
As I predicted they would, you know.
And they almost didn't want to settle because one of my QCs said, well, you know, Bonnie, libel is an action that you can ask for damages, but they don't have to apologize. That doesn't happen.
In court.
That doesn't happen. They said, we can't actually do anything that will cause that to happen. That's not one of the things that you're entitled to. And I said, well, that's the only thing that I will settle for. And they had to apologize. But I'm sure they were not wanting to have 19 days of my chattering about things that you and other people I love and respect had told me. They didn't want to talk about those things. Fair enough.
I had 4 days on the stand after they bankrupted me for legal costs, and it was solely for legal costs. I didn't have a credit card debt or anything beyond my mortgage. I didn't have any other debts. Richard, your lovely husband, sat in with me for the 2 days that Kendrick Moxon had me on deposition. And you know, my situation is unusual. I was not traumatized while I was in Scientology. I was traumatized afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there wasn't very much. You know, Moxon was traumatized after 2 days of doing a deposition with me, and they didn't even have me sign it because there wasn't one sentence that I'd said that they could use. Now, my situation is utterly unique. Anybody else, I'd become used to it over the years. You know, have you ever taken any psychiatric medications? You know, it's like these stupid questions. They know everything about you.
Absolutely.
And we so many times had people, I remember there's a couple that we were trying to train in helping ex-members, current members to get over it. And the guy basically said, look, he didn't want his sexual exploits to be known to his children. And I've heard that one so many times that I don't speak out against them because they will, and it's like, just accept it. We all did kinky stuff when we were kids and get over it. You know, your kids will find it funny, but this is a dark force in the world and the truth needs to be told about it. I've never gone anywhere with that argument, but
I think the victims of Aftermath that have now moved forward to take action, I mean, the very minimal that those people responsible for encouraging them to do that, the very minimal they could do is ensure that they're getting some help to recover, because that's such a cruel thing to do, to put someone, I mean, I was way down the line when we started those libel actions. You'd helped me tremendously before I even got to that point. And I found it difficult, and I had you.
Yeah.
I don't know what they will ever do to repair the damage. Even if they win, they could be doing damage that I'm not sure we can repair if they continue to use them as fodder.
No, it's nothing will traumatize you more than litigation. You know, nothing.
It's a World War I thing. You know, it's like a World War I thing of sending young men over the hill. You know, you're sending them into a litigation which is going to go on for years and years, and everything in their lives is going to be laid bare, and they're not even ready to talk about their experience.
And there is no recovery program in place. There is, you know,
nowhere.
Here I am, and I know the best in the world. You know, I think Rachel Bernstein is capable of dealing with an ex-Scientologist. I think Christian Shirko is capable of dealing with an ex-Scientologist. And my list has just come to an end.
Yeah.
There needs to be some concern about putting together a recovery program. And, you know, I've often thought about this. It's just that I don't have the time to give away the time anymore.
Sure.
For me to, I put the material together that's necessary, and I know you know, I could make a little check sheet from it, but it's work. And I am up to here with trying to help people in the wider world now, not just the...
I like that, though. I like what you're doing now is preventive, and that's good.
We can reach billions of people with prevention, so it's
I just want the people with these resources and the ability to do so, to focus on the person in front of them and what they need, and on those who are still entrapped, and less on some vendetta to make them look stupid.
The motivation that, I very strongly believe, and have done since I was a teenager, that the means and the ends must be the same.
Yeah.
The ends justify the means, but the means and the ends must be the same. And the end is actually to help people to overcome the damage. It's not to destroy the Scientology organization. If we track this back and look to David, when Christian Sherko, our dear friend Christian, did a piece with me the other week about, how can we help the leaders? And he said, he was going to talk to me about it, because I was the only person in the last 30 something years that we've known each other. 33 years. I was the only person who'd said to him that I would help David Miscavige, or if he was alive, would help Hubbard. No question about it. And this hatred, this get them back. Well, look at David Miscavige's childhood. I know his dad has got a take on this, but he put him into it.
Yeah.
And he had a kid who had very serious asthma, probably still does, even though Ron Miscavige in his book claims that it was cured. He's still using a Ventolin inhaler, to my knowledge, the last time. So he has, therefore trimendous amounts of hydrocortisone treatment, which of course makes him all muscly. He's on steroids, basically. So he'll have roid ragers, which we've heard about. And so where does this begin? Does it begin with Adam and Eve? Where does it begin? With Ron Hubbard, who was an extraordinarily toxic, narcissistic, manic depressive, paranoid. I think the argument is very strong that he had temporal lobe epilepsy. Been kicked in the head by one of those those Broncos that he was breaking when he was 3.5 years old. It's hard to believe, even when I was a Scientologist. One of them had kicked him in the head, caused a lesion and injury to his brain, because he has all 18 of the Barefedio traits of temporal lobe epilepsy: the grandiosity, the religious experiences, the hypergraphia, the not being able to stop writing, the world's most prolific author. Oh, well, he definitely had that one. So who's the victim? Where's the cause? What we want to do is rehabilitate the offenders so that they stop doing it, and help the victims so that the post-traumatic stress, or the post-coercive stress, I've got this new term, PTS is good though, post-traumatic stress, PTS.
So that post-coercive stress, PCT.
Yeah, post-coercive stress, PCs. We've plenty of these going on.
Plenty of PCs.
It's something we all suffer. The mistake is thinking there's post-traumatic stress disorder. That's one thing, and many ex-members have that. You certainly did. But there's also just simply post-traumatic stress, where any of us reminded of the past will go into that.
If you look at Marty Rathburn as an example, there was all this rage about Rathburn returning to doing whatever he's doing now, poor thing. But that didn't surprise me in the slightest. That they could turn that around.
I've seen it happen to a number of people.
His wife was not a Scientologist, yet he focused a lot on auditing her to clear, and they adopted a baby, and they had something to use on him, some weapon of.
Well, we will tell the social services that you're a bad parent. That's all it takes with an adopted child.
Exactly.
And it was evident in the Louis Theroux documentary that that's what they did. Are you earning your nut from this and able to support your kid, Marty?
So no one, all these people that were surrounding him when he was putting himself in the line, there was nothing but rage because he turned around. But who was investing in helping him when all that was happening?
Well, I was trying.
Yeah. Well, I tried to help Mosey.
His wife,
Yeah, but I couldn't get actually, I'm not sure she ever even received what I wrote. I said, because her case was so easily proved by my documents and things. Yep. She was trying to prove harassment. Well, I had documentation up to my eyeballs at
Believe me, I know.
Alexandra said, Bonnie, do you mind? We're just going to keep giving them a lot of rope and so that we can gain evidence about what their campaign against you is. And that wasn't fun to live through, but she kept giving them rope. She used to tease me. She used to call up and say, you know, we're trying to find a new source for rope because they've used up all the stuff we had
the end of my
storage. Yeah. But I think that, you know, I had a support team around me, and a lot of the focus from Richard and yourself and people around me was how to keep me from, you know, getting drowned in the process. But I don't see that happening with these people that are, these girls that are coming forward, these Jane Does. Who's helping them?
Let me say publicly yet again that I have approached the legal team. As soon as I heard about this case, I approached them and said, please talk to me. As yet, I've not had any response. And you know, I'm going to say it, the conceit of people, they think they understand this thing. I've spent more than 40 years now, 46 years nearly, 45 years studying this thing. In academic terms, academia.edu, the online resource for academic papers, lists me as having citations in 1,130 academic papers. There is nobody else. I was appointed an expert witness by the High Court in London in 1987. And yet, people, you know, I wrote the book, as you might say. The only history of Scientology ever published. Janet Reitman just plagiarized it, basically, allegedly. And yet, they still won't come to me, even when I'm not saying, give me money, even when I'm saying, just have a conversation with me and we'll see if I can help. They won't come to me because they know better. And then I get to pick up the pieces afterwards from some poor person who's been driven into the ground for the sake of self-aggrandizement or winning something or doing something. I don't understand it, and it makes me livid.
Yeah, me too.
You know, and I'm not looking for any work, you know, because as you say, for the last many years, since you know, hanging up my guns at Tony Ortega's in 2015, my focus has absolutely been on prevention, that we can reach most of the world and stop them from joining any authoritarian group or relationship, not just Scientology. So that I would estimate there are about 250,000 people out there who've been damaged by Scientology. Since 1950, since Dianetics, and you know, could do with some help. But hopefully, what I've written will get them through most of it. There needs to be a more concerted effort on the part of ex-members if they really do care. You know, and there are people doing great things. Jeffrey Augustine's Money Project is amazing. Chris Owen's project. What Chris Shelton has done is great. And it's great that Remini and Mike Rinder have put so much into the record. It's just, and Tony Ortega, you know, just amazing, Tony, my compadre, Tony. But there needs to be a process of truth and reconciliation here. And I don't have, you know, having dedicated so much of my life to this and lost so much, you know, I didn't gain anything from it. Even my publisher, when Blue Sky went to number 98 out of 4 million books at Amazon, bestseller, I didn't get any of the royalties. So that's been the case all the way along. So I'm not volunteering for anything here, unless somebody's serious and wants to put something together as an actual, something, you know, like Wellspring used to be to recover, or what Gilly Jenkinson is doing at Hope Valley, though she has no speciality in Scientology. Put something together for ex-members. And the most frustrating thing of all is this, that people have the idea that they'll take years to recover and they'll have to be involved in this expensive process. If I can't do it in an afternoon, it can't be done.
Yeah.
You know, that have I ever failed? Have you ever known me fail? Anybody that will talk to me has changed their mind about this subject. And I haven't changed it for them, you know?
I don't know why, or whatever efforts that, I mean, I don't see any, we've been kind of whitewashed out of the picture or something. It's very peculiar.
We spent decades doing this, and we've now got these amateurs doing just the kind of things that were being done in the 70s. It's like with de-radicalizing, there are people like Ted Patrick who want to kidnap people and, you know, stomp on the Quran and do things.
Well, there's all this litigation. There's all this litigation, but guess what? They had to apologize to me. Okay,
guess what? I got $2.9 million for Mayo's lawyers. Guess what? I helped Wallersheim get $9.2 million. Guess what? I helped Corridon get a $2 million building back. I've got precedents all over the place. You know, I've worked on 150 court cases, and almost all of them have been successful. We have precedent with Mary Johnston in Ireland that came from material I gathered for you, and yet they don't come and talk to me. Unless they're the National Enquirer, who do, you know, the National Enquirer is sensible enough.
They have a suit about harassment and fair game, and they don't even ask me.
Yeah, those of us who've experienced it and gathered the documentary evidence for it. But still, I think we perhaps come to the end of this beautiful conversation. And
yeah, now that we feel like we've vented our.
So much better.
Probably now if someone calls us, we'll say, well, we can't talk, we're busy.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my needle is floating.
Busy, back soon, gone fishing.
Yes, that's it. Busy, back soon.
Okay. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Mike.
It is. So we'll end the recording and we will go off and sneak into a private room and talk a little bit more. But
okay, darling. Okay.
So great talking with you. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
It's slim, it's cheap.
It's cheap.
It's like me, really.